All righty. Hey, good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, so we will start. How's everybody? Good, good. I'm David Ammons, and I was given the charge of welcome, which is one word, but I will tell you, as I got input on what that should be, they wanted to hear, the people I talked to, maybe I picked the right one, wanted to hear more history and more about Springmoor from a long time ago. So I hope I'm not too boring. I told Kyle to kick me if it's time to sit down, but I do want to go over a few things. I wrote more than you might want to see all the pages, but I'll go through them fairly quick. But Springmoor is a special place. It's somewhere I've been for the entire 35 years, and so there's a lot that we could go into. I will tell you, as I was coming to the door, Phyllis was joking with me yesterday about seeing some pictures of her and me 35 years ago, and I would guess I had no glasses, and I've probably gained 1 pound for each of the 35 years. So I don't know what that illustrates, but we'll just go with that. I do want to tell you, when I speak, which I do a fair amount here and other places, I try to be logical and the topics flow from one to the other. That's not the case today. The case today, I just thought I'll hit on a few things. I hope they resonate or mean something to some of you, and then you'll think, good gosh, he jumped completely to a different topic. But that's my plan. So if it's a plan, it makes it okay. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled that I was asked to be the welcome speaker. Now, Brandon may say I asked to be the welcome speaker as opposed to vice versa, but we'll leave that as it is. And I know that we're going to talk in a little bit about the executive directors and kind of go through us chronologically, and that may be the most important part. But I did want to share a few things. First, there's a lot of people that have a lot to do with why Springmoor is here, why Springmoor made 35 years, and some of those people are here, but there's a lot of people that are not here. So I want to tell you just a little bit, and I apologize. There's no way in the world for me to make sure my list is complete. So if you think I missed the most significant person, just don't tell them that, or I apologize. But Jim C. is the first person I want to mention. Jim C., which is spelled S-E-A-Y, was an attorney here in town for many, many, many years. He was the president of the board of directors for over 25 years, I believe. If any of you have ever tried to get an attorney to do thousands and thousands of hours for free, you know how accomplished we were to get his help. But Mr. C was a volunteer. Daniel, am I making that ring? That high pitch? Y'all hear that too, right? I can't do this yet, so we'll. But Mr. C is absolutely as instrumental to Springmoor being here as anybody else that's in the loop. So we miss him. Mr. C has passed away. Mr. C is why one of the wings in Stewart Health Center is named the C Wing, and was a great man. There was a group back pre-Springmoor in the 80s, early 80s, that was trying to see a place like Springmoor be built. And so he, representing some people from a couple of downtown Baptist churches, approached several developers, approached several other business people in Raleigh, and said, how do we make something like this come to fruition? And I would say it was his tenacity to push that got Marshall and Judd even more inspired. So later you're going to hear from Marshall, and I'll let him tell you more about that. But I do want to share that the impetus to do Springmoor came from a volunteer, long Raleigh ties, representing people that were downtown, which I think are part of Raleigh, not just downtown, but I think that's significant. Then I've put people in a few different groups that I want to make sure I sort of highlight a few of the key people. But Ivy Clayton, who many of you may know, is why we have a Clayton wing named after him also, was on our original board of directors. He had a lot of experience in various government offices and things through North Carolina and did a lot for us. So we don't want to forget Mr. Clayton today. Billy Bill would fall in that category. Some of you know Dora, who just passed away, but her husband was on our original board of advisors, was always very helpful, very eager to help us with anything that we needed. Bob White, I know many of you know or remember Bob White. I wrote, it's part of what I'm going to say today, will make me emotional. So if you see me reading, that's to stay out of that scenario. But Bob White's one of the classiest people I've ever met. But what Bob White did for Springmoor as a resident, and then the president of the Residents Association, and then on the board, was just always, it was just a model to follow. It's as gentlemanly as you could think of. Dr. Lovern, many of you may recall, Dr. Cook, and other past presidents of the board were always very important. Many of them gave hours and hours of time and hours of effort to all that we were assembling and trying to put together over the years, and deserve at least being mentioned today. I will also share, we've had help over the years from acting governors as well as past governors. That's been very helpful. If you look back, they have a lot of clout. If you knew Governor Moore or Governor Hunt, different people that have been involved at our kickoff, our groundbreaking, some of our other celebrations, all very significant. Another person that I want to be sure we call out today is Jim Lucas Sr. Jim Lucas Jr. today is our auditor, so if you recognize that name, it means you're reading the audit in the disclosure statement. But Jim Lucas Sr. brought years and years of experience working at the IRS, working in private practice, and lots of things, and had a lot to do with the formation of Springmoor in those early days. I would dare say that alone, he was the impetus behind having a management advisory committee, for example, which I think has always been very helpful at Springmoor to be able to get to that level of detail with a group of people charged to do that. Another group that I've kind of pulled, some of these were also board members, but I look at them more for their personal involvement, and that would be people that have helped us behind the scenes in ways you may or may not know. But Dan E. and Mary Louise Stewart fall in that category. My mother, this is the sad part to me, my mother, if she were here, would tell a story, or would make me promise to tell a story, that one day Mary Louise called when we had first started marketing of Springmoor, and she said she was not doing well. She was sick and at home. And literally in her broken voice, she said, "Joellen, if you'll come by here, I've made a list of about 50 people that should consider Springmoor that I'll give you, and I've already talked to most of them, so they'll take your call. We need this to happen." And you look back at things like that. I try to do new communities today. You know, had she not done that, and had we not had a jump start in marketing, would we be here now? I have no idea. So don't forget, through the process, there's just so many people that made a difference. One other little pet peeve of mine, in case you've ever said this, try not to say it again, is Dan and Mary Louise gave no financial contribution to have the health center named after them. It was done completely out of respect for who they were and all they had done. So once in a while, I hear people speculate it had to do with money, and that's not the case at all. It wasn't them, and that wasn't why they were honored in that way to do that. The Clayton wing, the C wing I already mentioned, fall into that category of again, it was just as a gesture to them for all that they had done. Mr. C, when we asked him if that would be okay, and Mr. Clayton likewise, both said, surely there's better people to me than to name that after, but if y'all feel strongly, as we talk through it, they agreed to that. Jim Long, who was with us in the early days of marketing, is very instrumental in why we're here today. Betty Moore, Darlene Horseman, Kenneth and Carl Evans. Some of you may remember, relatives of Marshall's, but I remember the days Carl was helping us sort out how the reception desk should work and the fire panel, and do guards radio receptionists or receptionist radio guards? Does the guard do all the cars out on the road? There's just a lot of that I look back now and say, well, this is how we do it. But we didn't know how to do it when we started it. So a lot of that was invented. Some of you may remember Kenneth. He did a lot for us also, both in security and in writing some manuals and stuff that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. There's two other people that I want to call out specifically because I think, in addition to some that I've named, are just instrumental to being here. So those of you who know Jim Cox, he likes the words we use for him, like a little quirky, a little funny, a little different. He likes that. He's proud of that, so don't take it personal. I don't know if he's here. Oh, is he there? I told you. I thought it was tied to Chapel Hill, but that's another story. But Jim has been significant since day one. If you don't know what all he has done for payroll, human relations, et cetera, he literally was here the first week I was here and got to know him. And if you've seen him scurrying back and forth across Sawmill Road, if you know how much when we've had mud wash in the front of the building or a tornado or hurricanes, you always know that no matter how fast I try to get up and get in the car, Jim will be here when I get here. So that's a special person. Throughout what I want to say today, I'm really trying to put my thumb on why Springmoor is special. And I'd love to tell you it's some lofty thing that we could document, but it really is not. It really is tied to just dozens and dozens and hundreds and probably thousands of people at this point that took on what Springmoor should mean and what it means and made a big difference. The next person is someone that I shared an office with when I first got here in the early 80s, and that's Phyllis Mayo. Those of you who know Phyllis could tell me more about why she's on this list than I could. But if you had a person that you said that is Springmoor, I would give that title to my mother and to Phyllis. So I told you. So for all of that, I just want to say thank you. To imagine that we've done this for 35 years and those people have given that much is strong. Also want to call out or mention some people that you may not have heard of, but Albert Sims. Albert Sims was on the board of another retirement community in the Virginia market, I think Richmond. And in the early days, before I was invited to big meetings, Marshall and Judd and Mason were headed up there to meet Mr. Sims, and he came down and helped us and did just lots of stuff. Now, I recently was with some people with the Virginia Baptist Retirement Homes, and I mentioned Mr. Sims, and they just were as flowery as me about how instrumental he was, how they've honored him over the years. He has unfortunately also passed away, but was key to why we are here today. The obvious group that a lot of people know about or have heard about would be my parents and Marshall Evans and Mason Williams. And so we're going to let some of that come from Marshall's comments and from other stuff you'll hear. But I would add to that list Kyle Dilday. It's just significant to me that we function every day as if no big deal, we're just functioning. Now, we're also good now at being busy and taking care of Springmoor. But the contributions from those people, Kyle is one of the early administrators of the health center, taking over as executive director when it was time for that, et cetera, has been instrumental to making Springmoor what it is. On my mom, I know some of you know this, so I'll try to speed through this, but if you've seen her hang a picture with the heel of her shoe, she did that. If you saw her or heard, she was borrowing a van to go to Pittsburgh and Siler City to get furniture at an affordable price. I work on some other communities who bring in these big name out of town interior decorators, and they tell me how many thousands of dollars every chair and every couch is. And if I thought ours were not good, I would not be praising what she accomplished. But working with Tom Collins, who owns Dexter Furniture here in town for 35 years, who's still there, still very appreciative of working with Springmoor, you just know how much she contributed. So I will also add, I don't see as many employees as I thought I would add, or as I thought I would see, but my mother's real love of being here, not to be personal to all the residents, but was all of you who worked here. She took all that very serious. One other thing I left out, but I see it in my notes now, I want to mention about Phyllis. Phyllis has a special trait, and not everybody can do this, but Phyllis can sing a song and make you teary, and then do a funeral or memorial service and make you happy. I've never understood that, because you go to one thinking it's going to be sad, but a person who understands where your soul is headed understands a funeral is a program, is not the end. So I appreciate that. Those memorial services you do, just amaze me. That I leave happy. I come in nervous I'm going to be sad, and then it's all happy. Another person that deserves mentioning that it meant everything to me for many, many years, and unfortunately has passed away, that would be Jimmy Edwards. Jimmy Edwards was our architect. Jimmy Edwards designed the buildings. Now, Judd or Marshall or Mason would tell you, thankfully they fixed it before Jimmy messed it up, but that was a sparring that they enjoyed. Jimmy was known over and over when he was envisioning South Village or the North Village. He would make sure he came at sunrise, he came at midday, he came at night, and would sit. I know he did this for a fact. I've seen him do it. He would just sit somewhere and say, I'm waiting on the land to tell me what this building should be. And that's why you go to School of Design, I guess, because to me, I'm looking for snakes and squirrels. He's waiting on the building to tell him what it should be. But Jimmy's views and passion were very real and very significant. Another person that many of you know is Mason Williams. Mason's been involved since day one. He's a classic example of behind the scenes. We recently had a small issue, I don't want to alert anybody, but a small issue with the underside of the South Village roof. And we were trying to get an engineer and trying to get an expert and trying to get some stuff. And one of us said, well, get Mason. And Mason went right up in the attic and went, oh, yeah, this is what's wrong. I was worried about that when we did that in the 80s. It took 30 years, but here's what we need to do. So as a resource for us, that's very significant. He was involved in building most of the buildings here. He took a little hiatus in a sailboat, but mostly was here, and has meant a lot to Springmoor for a long, long time. The other thing I understand is that my dad is watching on closed-circuit television, so we had hoped he would be here, but as some of you may know, he's in the health center for a few weeks, and so I'll just wave and tell him that I'm doing the best I could. I'm sure when I see him, he's going to say, you needed to mention your mother more and more and more. So that's what he would do, so you can fill in those blanks, but that's where we are. I want to tell you a few things that have been said over the years that I think, as I told you before, I'm trying to put my thumb on what is Springmoor, but I go to other communities, trust me, I do consulting and other stuff, and I hear, we're considering X, Y, Z, and they go, well, I need to see a projection. I need to see the impact to bottom line. I need to see internal rate of return. And that's not the way Springmoor has ever functioned. I used to be told, well, if that's what you think it ought to be, let's do that. Or I would be told, Springmoor's only first priority is the residents. Tell all the banks to get over that. So those are real sentences. If some of you are bankers, don't take it personal. I know Mr. Purser may be here, but I was in all those meetings where the bank said, well, the entrance fee, at least the deposits, need to be prioritized as collateral, and Judd or Marshall, either one, would say, yeah, we just ain't doing that. If we have to leave, let's leave. I'm going to go to lunch. So we just did not do that. Another phrase that I hear all the time that I think a lot of is, well, David, is that how you would want it if it was your mother or you lived there? And that's the way those decisions should be made and have been made, and I think are why Springmoor is what Springmoor is today. It's my second to last page, don't be nervous. I want to tell you one thing about my early employment. I came here in the summer of '84 to help with punch lists and stuff for construction, went back and finished school and came back full-time in June of '85. And because I was nervous and a little afraid of Mr. Evans and trying to make a good first impression, I would show up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and find out he beat me by 2 hours. I thought I was early. So I used to, he's behind me, so I won't look back, but I used to walk by his car and go, God, it's already cooled off. He didn't just park that car. He's been here. So, but those days, I still walking around occasionally am overwhelmed. When I see policies in the health center or policies on how to mop or how to do food service or employee stuff or the resident handbook or the residents in care agreement, all those were blank. I mean, those didn't exist. People think you just show up and there's these books, but Mr. Evans wrote all of those things. I don't know where all that came from. I know some of it third party, but a lot of it just grinding out effort to do that. So I hope that we've tweaked it over the years, improved it over the years, but the credit to starting it is just huge. I'll also share, some of you, lots of you are old enough to understand this. We had no computers. It was typing. It was pulling out the piece of paper if you messed up. It was putting a carbon piece behind it if you wanted a copy. Later we got a photocopier. We thought we had something special, but it was just a different day. Lynn and some of the secretaries that were here way back, our office managers now, were phenomenal and did draft after draft after draft to make all that work. Another aspect that I want to touch on before I leave my parents and Marshall and Mason part, which they don't like to talk about, but today's an audience for me to talk about it for just a second at least. It took me 2 or 3 years of being here before I was in the right meetings to figure out how much personal commitment they made to Springmoor. I was in a meeting once and the banker said, well, we need to talk about guarantees. And the answer was, I've already personally guaranteed everything. If Springmoor goes bad, you get my house, my car, and my beagle. So if you know what saying beagle in that sentence meant to my dad, but that's very real. Springmoor in those days, what was a dream, Springmoor was a startup. Springmoor was Greensfield or green space as they call it, trying to become what we are today. So I've done mostly for fun. So if I leave out anything, don't make fun of me. But just a little thing I want to summarize as I view the 5 executive director tenure. So I wrote, Marshall invented everything, or if we are like a cruise ship, which some people like that reference, some people don't, he decided before construction, while the thing was not even under construction in port, how, what, when, where, etc. His ability to go from a blank page to a full cruising ship is really unbelievable looking back at that. I followed him as executive director, and I tried really hard to figure out, can we put an autopilot on this ship? Can we improve the things that are happening on the ship, whether that's transportation, security, whatever it is? Can we, just is really, I'll just say improve it. I wrote more than that, but that was really my goal, was to look at how to improve things. One thing, for example, I was very proud of, and I'm more proud of the answer I got back from the board, but one year we had a big board meeting. It was specifically for the topic of we need a retirement plan for the employees. We had gone from 30, 40 employees to a couple hundred. We were being asked about that a lot. So fresh out of my little business degree, I wrote this big presentation. I was so proud. It was even had color. If those days, you had to go to somewhere else to get color prints. So I had done this whole presentation. And Mr. Clayton and Mr. C both stopped me at some point and said, David, do you think this is good for the employees? I said, yes. They said, do you think, therefore, it's good for Springmoor? I said, yes. Can you skip the rest of that presentation? I make a motion we do that. So I said, well, sure. I had a whole list, but that really does illustrate where the focus was. The focus was, is this best for Springmoor? Then let's do that. After me was Kyle. I don't know what he did. He slept. No, I'm kidding. I would say Kyle did a lot for us. I already mentioned that before, but taking where I was trying to get us, I'll say on automatic pilot and improving some things, Kyle did a lot for improving the resident care committee process, kicking off senior staff stand-up meetings, kicking off more of a suggestion box, working more with the resident association committees. I mean, just really took things to the next level of how to make all of this a broader process of leadership, rather than, from the beginning, in case you haven't figured this out, Marshall was in charge, and then I was trying to enlarge that a little bit, but Kyle did a lot for bringing that to the next level. And then the next executive director was Fred Connor, you're going to hear from in a minute. Fred taught us that employees should be called associates, which is something I heard all the time, and I thought it was kind of funny, and we picked on him for that at the beginning, but then I realized it really does illustrate what I just said Kyle and Fred both did, which was we already felt that strongly about employees, but they took it to the next level of saying, well, they're not, you're here and they're the employee. We're all associates. We're all, we just have different titles and different things. So I would applaud Fred for all of that. The executive director we have now, I'm completely joking here, so don't take this serious, but has certainly showed us how we should dress better. I was going to tell him today, a wide, solid colored tie will come back, I promise. I don't know when or how, but and I even have designs on my socks today in honor of Brandon. So normally black or blue, but today little Wake Forest Deacon hats, if you care. But in addition to that, obviously I'm kidding about that, but that has helped a lot. The tie today, of course, is rechargeable, so factor that in. But has done a lot of things to improve us. His enthusiasm, his industry experience, bringing us some stuff that shows to make sure we think outside of what we think we're good at. He says other places are doing this and other places are doing that, and have we considered whatever? So there's been a lot of improvement from that, and I thank him for that. I don't work as closely with him now as Kyle does, but I think we're very impressed. That's why I tell him all the time, you're the second best executive director we've ever had. Now, I don't tell him who I think is first. We'll let y'all speculate on that, but I always tell him you're certainly the second. Two more things I want to tell you real quick. Number one, I benefit and have for 30 years for something that I used to be better at saying thank you. Now I actually feel more guilty than I used to. I go places. I had a text today from someone whose mother recently passed away here. I go to some funerals. I go to church. I go to football, basketball. I can go to the mall. And people stop me and say, Springmoor's the greatest thing. What your family did and what you've done is phenomenal. And I'm fully aware that I have to say thank you, and I do say thank you, and I'm proud to say thank you. But they say that because their neighbors loved on their parent, the staff loved on their parent, the nurses, the housekeepers, whatever it is, their love of Springmoor, they're saying it to me because of my last name. But why they love Springmoor is much broader than that. So on all of your behalf, I get to say thank you all the time. I get credited with that, and I appreciate that. But I do know that's important. In fact, I push sometimes for what would you say was the most important part? And of course, if there was a long-term stay in the health center, they bring up the nurses. But most of the time, what they bring up is their parents' friends at dinner, their friends who took care of them when they couldn't get their mail, their friends who invited them to go places even when they knew it was a challenge. So thank you. All that matters. I know you know it matters. That's why you do it. I know you've known that longer than I've known that, but it's very real. So in summary, I would say yesterday and today, as we celebrate 35 years of being open, don't forget the years from 1982 to 1985 when Springmoor was being formed or hatched. Somebody called it one time. I like that. And that's when residents started moving in. So we're celebrating 35 years because that's when people moved in late 84. But the truth is, years went on before that. A lot goes on after that. And frankly, we're working long and hard. I just had lunch with someone that we really want to talk about. Well, I'll tell you a little side story I get the biggest kick out of. If you ever talk to a young person, we'll say high school or maybe college, but we'll say high school, who's in science or flight or space or into those types of interest, and you say something about, which I've tried to do, I've tried to sound current, and I say something like, oh, you saw the Apollo movie coming out, or you saw they're talking again about the moon, and they'll go, well, sir, we went to the moon 50 years ago. I don't know why we're not at Mars and Venus. So that really is the mindset of young people, and it should be all of us, is that's great, but that's really water under the bridge. It's whatever it is. So I'm very excited about some stuff we're looking at, and we'll be sharing more with you in the weeks or months to come. Some of you already know a lot about the work we're doing to convert or switch over the health center to a residential model. The stuff we've done in refurbishing, the stuff we're doing is all great for Springmoor, but we're also studying really hard now, how can Springmoor do more as the, I don't love this word, but as the institution that has become for other people. So everything from Meals on Wheels to Maury cards and conscious aging to whatever the case may be, we really are looking forward to exploring, great, you've been Springmoor for 35 years. You have figured out housekeeping, food service, and security. Isn't it time now to talk about how you can do more for 27615 or Raleigh or even the state or even broader than that? So I hope you'll join me in that enthusiasm. I appreciate you letting me talk so long. I don't know how long that was, 20 minutes. But I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
This is obviously planned for David there. I'm going to talk about Springmoor from the early days, the beginning. I do that at some risk because there are so many members of staff who've been here so long, the fellows here who've been here so long, I'm subject to being contradicted on any detail. To give you an example of how people see things differently, I was in a meeting with a group of people recently. Is that better? I was in a meeting with a group of people recently, and I was telling the tale of when I hired Phyllis Mayo to be a member of the staff here. And my story was that Phyllis had learned about Springmoor long before we even cut the first tree. She had read an article that Jim Long of First Baptist Church, the associate pastor, was joining our staff. And she said, this is what I'd like to do. She came down for an interview. And my version is that we talked. I was very impressed with her. I told her that we didn't have jobs, but if you would go back and work in your present place for about a year, you could be sure of a job. Well, I was telling this story, and Phyllis was present. And she said, that wasn't the way it was at all. You led me on and led me along for a year before you offered me a job. So you see how recollections can differ significantly. But in any event, I'll take those chances. My first recollection of Springmoor was the First Baptist Church downtown Raleigh in 1981. And following the service, I was going out the back corridor, and Judd Ammons was standing there and stopped me and says, what do you know about these life care centers? And I said, well, I have a career in the public health service. Good deal. He says, you reckon I could build one? And I said, I'm sure you could if you wanted to. He said, you reckon you could run one? I'm sure I could if I wanted to. And we went away. Well, later he called me. I was working at the Research Triangle at that time. and said, I have two people here who know a great deal about life care. Let's set up a meeting and talk with them. So we did. Well, not much came of that, but it sparked more interest, more enthusiasm, and we began to really dig into, shall we try this? Can we do this? There weren't life care communities in abundance in those days. There was one in Chapel Hill. There were no others in the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle area. Well, Judd put together a development team to explore the feasibility of developing and building a life care community. And that development team consisted of himself, Mason Williams, and me. Judd, if you don't know him, you need to get to know him. One way you can get to know him a bit is in the library, there is a brief biography of Judd that tells all about his upbringing, the different projects he's undertaken, and what he's achieved. He is simply one of the most remarkable visionary people I've ever known. We were very proud to have Judd lead this effort. Judd was not only interested in developing life care, interested in developing other communities. He was building all over the state. But he also was an influence in Raleigh in its growth, had a good deal to do with the greenways and parks and other things that have happened good in Raleigh. He was very instrumental in some of those things. So I would urge you to read this biography of Judd and get to know him a bit, because he is the taproot of Springmoor. He was then, he is now, and a very remarkable person. Mason Williams was very skilled in building. He's a guy who paid attention to detail. My theory is the quality of anything is governed by the attention you pay to detail. And Mason paid lots of detail attention to the building of this place, the design of it, the architect. I had input in terms of trying to meet life care needs. Mason in terms of all the regulatory requirements and sound construction. Judd with his vision of how to make it relevant through the ages. We didn't want some fad of building that would be obsolete in a few years, and I think those visions have held up well. I'm very proud of Springmoor and what it is. You know, Judd was influenced enough in this area that in 2011 he was inducted into the Raleigh Hall of Fame. That's remarkable. In all of his efforts, he had a full-fledged partner here at Springmoor and all of the developments, wherever it was, in his wife, Joellen Ammons. We decided to really pursue, shall we build this or is it folly? And we studied, we sought sources of funding, we learned everything we could learn, and in about 1982, we said, let's go for it. So in April of 1983, we had a presentation luncheon at the Marriott Hotel. Sylvia Dole, who was Judd's was and is Judd's office manager, had kept names who called and wanted to know about this. They'd heard. We tried to keep a low profile because in that day, every week somebody was going to build a life care community. We decided we didn't want to be the list that, on the list that talked about it and didn't do it. So nonetheless, Sylvia kept names and addresses, and by the time we were ready to present the plan for Springmoor to the public in April of 2003, Sylvia had over 500 names. We invited those 500 and some people, and about that many came to have a presentation luncheon with us. We had no idea whether they came for a free lunch, curiosity, or really wanted to find out about life care. Well, we learned very soon there was deep interest and really began getting applications right away. And things moved forward to what it is today. My role in developing Springmoor was in the business end. I was responsible for developing the business model for life care and health care plan, programs, marketing, staffing. Some of those folks are here from the first day. For the accounting system, for contracts, every aspect of business. And we got it with the help of staff that we were employing. We got it off the ground in good manner. We were responsible for all the legal documents, and then as executive director, I was manager responsible for operations for a number of years until I decided I needed a life, and David was ready to become the executive director. Now, all of this was sound foundation, good information, but you know, and it was all crucially important. But what's equally or more important are the folks who have lived here through these 35 years and who live here today, some of the finest people I could ever imagine. The staff, some of them have been here as much as 35 years, and I'm going to call the names in a moment of those who've been here, who've made their career at Springmoor. And it's remarkable, and we're very proud of all of them. I kid with some of them in the halls now and enjoy their friendship. So we have 16 people who have lived and worked at Springmoor 25 years or more. I'm going to read their names, have them come up and be recognized by their manager, and then we will have a round of applause for all of them after we present all of the recognitions. The first name I want to mention is our chaplain, Phyllis Mayo, who's been with Springmoor for 35 years. All of you know her. I don't need to tell you about her. She's an outstanding person. So Phyllis Mayo. The next person I'd like to mention is Barbara Vinson, who's a housekeeper of 35 years. I asked Barbara one day, how do you manage to stay so upbeat? She said, well, of course I am. This is my home. And Barbara's sister, Sandra Harris, has also been here 35 years in housekeeping and done an extraordinary job. The next guy has held more jobs here probably than anybody. He's worked in marketing, he's worked in human resources, he's worked in the insurance department, all parts of Springmoor, always available and willing to pitch in. Jim Cox, who is now in human resources director, he's been here 35 years.
And survived. This was my first day badge. 34 years old.
We were operating on the cheap then. The next name has been here since we completed our dining and kitchen, Sam Massenberg. Sam's the production supervisor for dining services. Another housekeeper, Lonnie Walker. Lonnie's been here for 34 years. Lonnie tells a story of many years ago. Someone reported she was smoking in the kitchen. And so Lonnie came up to see me. And not knowing what's going to happen, I didn't remember this. And I said, well, Lonnie, what happened? She said, you know your job, get out of here and go do it. Then the next one is Gloria Wilkins. Gloria's been here 33 years and is a real trooper. Terry McMahon has been here for 33 years. Terry has been in charge of the Supportive Living Center for the entire time I think we've had it in process. So Terry is a very outstanding person and has contributed a great deal to Springmoor. Terry. Then James Dixon has been here for 32 years in the security staff. Is James here? James cannot be here today. The next person was always an encouragement to me. In a tough day or lots of pressure, you'd see this lady go down the hall, always had a smile on her face, and today she still has a smile on her face. That's Priscilla Frazier. The next lady has been here 31 years in dining service production, Gladys Crowder. Gladys really cares a lot about folks here. On one occasion, I was in the great room and I saw Gladys coming through and had a little package in her hand, and she was taking food to someone. And I said, Gladys, where you going? She smiled at me and said, you know where I'm going. Sally Buckner, Dining Services Hospitality for 30 years. Sherry White is now inventory coordinator, has been in the Springmoor for 30 years. I'll tell you one thing, don't try to go get anything. She won't let you have it. Gloria Almighty has been a nurse in the health center for 29 years. Gloria. Jackie Daniels. Jackie has been Springmoor for 27 years as a diet writer. Is Jackie here? Jackie is always a jovial person. I'm sorry she wasn't here for you to enjoy her presence. Then Ken Dunson, in charge of security and transportation, has been director of that department for 27 years. And while he's not here and not an employee as such, I want to recognize one other person who's been with Springmoor about 33 years, our medical director, Dr. Wells Edmondson, who's also primary care physician for many of you. Dr. Edmondson. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm much quicker this time. I have just a few names. I was the second generation, as it calls me here, the second executive director, and we have 4 employees that were hired when I was executive director that have been here a long time. First is Michael Davis, who's in food service, been here 27 years. Come on up. Thank you, sir. Sarah Lynn Wood, I saw coming back in a minute ago. I know we spent a lot of quality time in the snow, so I can tell you her house, it used to be her house on Oberlin Road in the snow. We used to find her. So Sarah Lynn has been a big help for many years. Thank you, Sarah Lynn. The next name, I just asked Kyle if I've never heard of this person, and it's because the whole name is listed here. So his real name is MacArthur Eaton, but he's been Mac for 25 years. So. Mac is also in food service, and I'm sure some of you are used to seeing him moving around. And then in our security and transportation, we have Tony Thomas. Tony's been here for 25 years. We appreciate all you do. Thank you. I'm going to read a few people that are what we are calling second generation residents well, they're going to read some more employees. Don't go too far. When Kyle gets up here. Don't you have employees? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that isn't up. I'm sorry. So we've been focusing more on second generation residents, and I want to recognize those 2 people from my years. That's Debbie Reynolds, who many of you know, who's down at Supportive Living Center. I think I saw her a minute ago. Thank you, Debbie, for standing up. Debbie has the same reason to be such a nice person that I do. She had wonderful parents. So Thorne and Everlyn were special people to us. And then Nick Rose Is he here? He's been here since 1995 and had a brother here. That's right, a sister. He's the brother of a resident who was here before. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle. I want to add one thing. I had in my notes, but I didn't say. I hope you know, some of you that aren't from Raleigh, I would be remiss not to tell you the significance of our employees and Springmoor of Jeffreys Grove Elementary School. That may sound funny to you, but I went to Jeffreys Grove 1st through 6th grade, and there were Masseys and Dunns and those families and some of the ladies in the food service and all that I knew when I was 1st through 6th grade. So it is very much. Springmoor is you would say homegrown in ways. If you moved here from Poughkeepsie, you don't grasp how much that matters to us at Old Raleigh. And I like Poughkeepsie. I've been there. It's a beautiful place. But it is significant. So with that, Kyle.
Daniel, can you go back to that first slide just a minute with Joel and Judd and everybody? I'll let you go back there in a second, but it just amazes me how I look the exact same now as I did then. And Marshall looks old as dirt. Judd looks like he's happy. David looks young. He doesn't have any gray hair. No, in all seriousness, though, I do want to say with that picture a second. David has been a dear personal friend. I'm not going to get emotional either. David's been a dear personal friend, and we've worked together a long time. He means a whole lot to me. And the people on there mean a tremendous amount to me. All of us have second moms and dads. I have 2 second dads. I have 1 second mom, and that's my second mom right there. Jo Ellen was very special to me. And I've seen her with the shoe, and I've seen her with the nail, and I've helped her with the shoe hang pictures. I've seen her with the shoe polish on furniture, trying to fix scuffs. She was a remarkable lady, and I miss her every day. Judd is just remarkable. I remember when I was interviewed, and I'm not going to take as much time as David did, but I do have to take just a few moments. When I was being interviewed for the job of administrator in Stewart Health Center a long time ago in 1987, Judd and Marshall, I've interviewed with Marshall in his office here, and it was after the big ice storm. If you remember, he had a big ice storm. And I was living in Greenville, North Carolina, and drove up to interview with Marshall. And we went through, I thought going to be a decent hour interview or so. So my wife came with me. And so we parked in the front parking lot, and I came in. And I think, Marshall, about 4.5 hours later, our interview was over. I had walked this whole building. I thought my car had run out of gas. My wife was frozen in the car. And I still came to work for Marshall after all that. But we went to lunch at Rockola Cafe at Sawmill Road, in the Sawmill Road, Judd and David and Marshall and I, and that's the first time I'd met Judd. And what a man. There's just no other word for it. So, Judd, thank you for the opportunity for me to be here. I appreciate it. But anyway, there's all very special people, but it still just amazes me how daggone young I look compared to them. Anyway, all right, Danny, you can catch up now. I did come seriously in March of 1987. I came to Springmoor, and I was at that time the administrator in Stewart Health Center. That's what I came to work to be. We had 63 beds in Stewart Health Center at that time. We now have 191 beds. We've added on multiple times during that time. I then, shortly thereafter, became the associate director, and then was fortunate enough to be the assistant director, and eventually blessed to be the executive director, the third executive director here at Springmoor. And so, as you see, I became the executive director in January 1st of 1997. I will tell you that when I came March of 1987, it was one of the best moves, definitely the best moves that I've ever made in my career. So as of this March, I've been associated with Springmoor for 32 years. I turned 30, I turned 40, I turned 50, and I turned 60 while associated with Springmoor. So I'll tell you the truth, I don't plan on seeing y'all at 70. I plan to retire before the 70 mark comes. But it has been a blessing in my life and my family's life, and it has been truly a family to me. The staff, without calling lots of names, but these people you see here that have already been recognized, they've been the success of Springmoor. They are what Springmoor is, and I thank each one of you from the bottom of my heart because you're all very special to me. Also, we'll mention that there are a few other people that I will say that have been here a long time, and I just thought it was very interesting. I wanted to point out, I hired a few people who are still around. Actually, I will point out Randy Horton, I hired over 20 years ago. Leah, I don't know if you're still in here or if she's out and about, but Leah Willis was one of my hires quite a few years ago also, over 20 years ago. Carrie Corley was my hire over 20 years ago. And just as an example, out of your 14 current department managers, 9 of them have been at Springmoor over 20 years. So that's pretty amazing. And in today's society, when people stay probably 2 to 3 years and sometimes 2 to 3 days in a job, it's amazing that we have that many people who have made this, as David said, I believe, their career. And it's important, and that's what makes Springmoor very special and what it is today. So please know I'm just very proud to have been a part of Springmoor and still be a part of Springmoor every day and trying to make your life the best it can possibly be. So with that, I do want to recognize the second generation residents that were here during my tenure from January 1 of 97 to May 30th of 2008. And if they're here and can and would stand, that would be great. Jack Chase. Mr. Chase is here, I don't believe. Angela Dillard. And I apologize because I didn't have a chance to survey the crowd before, so I'm not sure who is and isn't here. Virginia Doucette. There's Miss Doucette back there. Raise her hand high. Yes. Gay Hertzman. Ms. Hertzman is over here. Kay McCall. Dot McGee. I thought I saw Dot over there. Yeah. Here's Ms. McGee. That's fine. Jane Rogers. Is Jane in here? And Barbara Volk. Ms. Volk is over here. It's interesting. We'll have to just say Barbara and not Mr. Volk, but we know he's there beside you. But we're making the connection with Barbara being the niece of Kay Stanford. So that was the second generation residents that I were here. The last thing I'll say before I sit down is I have one claim to fame that none of these other gentlemen can have. And I wish I could say I was proud of it, but I guess I shouldn't be. I'm the only executive director that hired someone to be groomed to become the executive director and gave him a heart attack in 3 weeks. So with that, Fred, 1 week. I'm sorry, only 1 week. I gave him a heart attack in 1 week. Fred Connor had a heart attack right after I hired him, and I said, well, what have I done now? But anyway, Fred.
Oh my goodness, it is so nice to be back here in front of you guys, and I see a lot of familiar faces, and that's just wonderful. Kyle did hire me, and I did have a heart attack in 1 week. I think I slowed down from my previous career long enough for it to catch up with me when I transitioned from Jacksonville up here. But it's been a great career. It's been wonderful, and I got indoctrinated to Springmoor long before I started working here. Virginia Williamson was my mother-in-law, and she'd been here for about 8 years before I ever started. And I remember a time when she'd been here maybe 6 months, and we took her to Richmond with us one Sunday to visit one of our daughters. We came back that Sunday evening, and as we pulled in the entrance out here at the front off the highway, she says, oh, that's my home. I'm back home. This is my home. And she was thrilled. And so my indoctrination to Springmoor right then was just outstanding. But I also like to recognize when I had that heart attack, and I was laying in the hospital and had my surgery, and I think I did surgery on Tuesday. Thursday night, Judd Ammons called. He said, boy, you get better. You still got a job. So thank you, Judd. Like I said, I've always loved working here. The residents and the staff have made this Springmoor just an incredible place. The friendliness and the caring atmosphere here is just beyond belief. It was so refreshing to get here and see all that. It's been an honor to be here, and during my tenure, we got to do a lot of projects with everybody's help and resident and staff input. We did the North Village enlargement and all kind of things, and one of the things that was really controversial was we were going to have somewhere for adult beverages. So we got that, and then we did South Village and got the Wellness Center up and running and the Pathways Wellness Program. So it's always a really good thing to hear, but Before I introduce residents, I'd like to thank the Board of Directors, David and Kyle, our management team here, all the staff and residents for your support while I was here. I'd like to thank Brandon for coming in and taking over and leading Springmoor to that next level, taking us to the future as a premier community. And then a special thanks to the Ammons family, Judd and Joe Ellen, as well as Marshall Evans and everybody that was involved in getting the Springmoor vision up and running and what it is today. Thank you very much. I'd like to recognize residents that are second generation from the time that I was here. And first off, Judd Ammons, he was here from the beginning, and his mother-in-law, Jessie Williams, was one of the first residents here. Graham Anderson. Graham, are you here? Back there at the door, good to see you. He was the son of Bertha Anderson, who was here. Then we had Blake Idlett, came in 2013. He's the nephew of Mary McGee Smith from 1985. I see Blake. Okay, then Marlene Lambeth. That was one busy lady when I was here. She was always doing something. Daughter of Helen Brindley. Then is Marlene here? Virginia Little. Daughter of Blanche Halleck. Greg Mangum. They have Greg here today. Son of Maisie Mangum. Dory Monroe. Dory, you here? Good to see you. Sister-in-law of John Monroe, Betty Purser. Is Betty here? Back here. Daughter-in-law of Ruth Purser. And then Louise Tippett. Is Louise here? There we go. She's busy too. Daughter of Emily Hall Jones. Thank you guys so much. I did. I am so sorry. Then Betty Duke, daughter of Hugh and Rachel White, and I saw Miss Duke coming down the hall earlier. Good to see you. But thank you so much for your cooperation and your support when I was here as the executive director. I appreciate it, and this is just a wonderful community, and thank you for letting me be a part of it.
All right, good afternoon. How long do I have to talk? It's 3 o'clock. I got to stay here to 5, so I figured we could all stay here to 5. Is that good? I just want to say thank y'all for letting me be a part of this. This has just been, I'll talk about in a second, more of a dream of my career of being at a place like this. But, you know, we can talk long. I can start from that great picture to the left when I was born, right there in 1979, all the way to about 5 years later when I cried when the Dukes of Hazzard car came to my birthday party and refused to get in until the very end until my mom made me, to just last weekend at 40 years old driving 5 hours to ride in it one more time. So I've done a lot here and there, and between all of that, I have been blessed to be at a fantastic community, to be around people that are like family. The first time I noticed that I really realized that Springmoor was really special was when I came to interview here at a board meeting, and once I was here, all 4 executive directors were at the meeting, and then I was there at the meeting as well. And I was like, where else would I be able to go to see all 4 previous executive directors still being involved with Springmoor and a part of the community, and still to this day, we're all here together involved with it. So it is just a real blessing to be here. It is truly a family. I talk all the time about Kyle being a second dad to me, and just helping me a lot. I do work well with him. He treats me like a son, sometimes good and bad. So he he tells me I'm doing good and tells me when I'm doing wrong, and I appreciate that. And it's good to have those relationships. And all the people that talked about Judd and Joelle, and I unfortunately did not get here before she passed away, so I did not get to experience the relationship with her. But of course, I knew Judd, and of course, know Judd very well. I check on him about every night before I leave if there's not somebody in the room. But the first time I met Judd, we were at the board meeting, the one I was talking about previously, and everybody went around and said their name, what college they went to, or what team they liked. So I figured, well, I got to say something too, I'll try to say something clever. So, because Kyle told me a little bit, he said, "Just gonna joke around." So you just kind of give it right back to him, you know. So everybody's going around. I'm a wolf pack. I'm a Tar Heel. I'm a Duke. Blue Devil. And I said, "Well, I'm a Gamecock." And I remember right after that, just he ain't got no sense. So I knew. So I knew at that point that that I was in good company. At least I said my expectations can't be that high. He already thinks I have no sense. So if I do a little bit good, I'll be doing all right. So, but some of y'all have heard me say this before. I got it. I got into retirement communities at the age of 15. My first job back in Aiken, South Carolina was a dishwasher in a community similar to this. Not as big and nice as this, but it was a retirement community, mainly independent living. And I did that job all through high school. And one day, one of the servers called out, and they asked me to go serve in the dining room. And I was just dreading that. I was just enjoyed being back in the kitchen and listening to the radio and doing the pots and pans, Mac. You know what I'm talking about? You're just kind of in your own world, you know, and just doing your thing. So when I got out there, that's when I first developed a passion for really serving elderly adults. I've always been interested in hospitality, and that's why I liked the community I was at. It was kind of like a hotel. You know, you had housekeeping, and you had food service, and you had maintenance and all those things. But the people that lived there, the people that we were serving were actually residents. They actually lived there. They didn't check in and out like a hotel, and you got to develop relationships with them. And that's what was so important to me. I'm very close to my grandparents still. I'm very lucky to have a set of grandparents still living, and I've had older friends from church and neighbors my entire life. So I was able to somehow, God willing, make a career out of something that I truly love. And you know, and I talk about relationships, and you know, my whole career goal was to be an executive director of a big, nice, very family-friendly retirement community. And I've worked in 2 other places, and this is my third, and I hope it will be my last. It's been beyond wonderful. And I'll just tell this quick story before we introduce my second-generation residents, because I think it's all about, I talk about relationships a lot. I found out about Springmoor and Kyle and David through a relationship. We had a mutual friend in Greenville, South Carolina, that I was introduced to. And I had a friend, and he said, "You need to meet this guy, Aaron. He's the only person I know that works in senior living. I don't know anybody else that does that, you know." So he got us together and started talking, and he said, and my friend Aaron said, "Well, you need to meet these guys, Kyle and David. They're just really innovative. They're doing great things, and I work with them some. You ought to just call them up." And so I think I don't know if they called me or I called them. I think I just called, and we started talking, and they said, "Why don't you just drive up to Raleigh one day?" So this has been, this has been probably 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago than when I first met David and Kyle. And I remember driving up to Raleigh and spending the day with them, and we just talked about everything, what I was doing, what I wanted to do, my life, just as comfortable as can be. I can remember sitting down on, used to be a couch in Kyle's office, and just sitting there and talking, and take your coat off, and just be comfortable, be at home. And we just really kicked it off. And I said, God, when I left, I think I'd really like to work for these guys one day. I said, I hope they enjoyed meeting me. And one thing led to another. So over those 4 years, I'd kind of stay in touch with them. I'd email Kyle every once in a while and say, "Hey, how's it going? Are you going to some meeting?" Thinking, well, I'll meet with him there. Maybe we'll talk, and we'll kind of stay in touch. So, and we stayed in touch over the years. And then I'll never forget. I was at my previous job, and David called me and told me about Springmoor, and that Fred was going to be retiring, and asked if I'd be interested in interviewing. And it's just been a dream come true ever since that. So, left Greenville and moved here, and it's been the best experience I could ever imagine. So it's all been about the people I work for, the people that made it like this, the residents I serve every day, and the employees I work with. So thank you all very much. I'm so thankful to have relationships with each of you, and you all mean very much to me. So I've got a few residents here that are special to me as well, that are second generation residents. So I'm going to mention them. If you're here, just raise your hand or stand, and I'll do a few closing words, and then we'll be done. But before I forget, because I will forget, if all the employees could please stay afterwards, we're going to get a group photo. We want to highlight this. This is a big occasion for us, and we want to not only give you a little something to say thank you, but also let everybody else know we thank you, and what a wonderful job y'all have done for us. So just hang tight after the program for a few minutes. So the first one we have is a new resident, Stephen Billy. Is he here? Thank you. Yes, sir. I've not a chance to meet with you very much. I know you're new, so I look forward to getting to know you better. Is Mr. Bullard in here? A.J. Bullard? All right. Becky King. All right. All mine are here so far. Great. Okay. Miss Louise Ledbetter? She's not here? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Hal Miller? Sister Miller here? Okay. Becky Moore? Okay. How about Sally Neal? Now, that's a busy lady, too. And I talk about some busy ladies, and she is into everything. So she's definitely one of those that the previous directors have mentioned. How about Miss Leanne Owen? Okay. All right, great. Hey, Miss, and Barbara Page? I'll stand in her behalf. Oh, okay. There you go, sir. And Miss Kerfoot Ritter, new resident. Welcome. I look forward to meeting you and getting to know you better as well. Thank you. And lastly, it's Bill Taylor here. All right. Well, those are my people that I'm very thankful to get to honor. I get to, I'm sure there's going to be many more, hopefully, that I'll be associated with. Just to kind of close here today, I just want to say that I really can't wait to see what the next 35 years holds for us. It's like I said, it's a pleasure to be a part of this great family and to be up there. I hope that I can see everything go through over the next 35 years. I'm really excited about things we have planned for the future and health center renovations and certain activities to broaden care for residents in the Raleigh area that David talked about, and just so many innovative things that I think that we can still be the forefront and leaders as we were 35 years ago. So that's going to be a great place, and a great place. Springmoor's going to be a great place to be. I figure Kyle will still be around here kicking somewhere. I'll still be dealing with him one way or the other. So I figure he will be here. And in the meantime, we have a lot of fun things to look forward to. So thank y'all for being on this journey with us. Thank you for being a part of this. And I think Mr. Amos may want to say something here at the end.
I want you to say this, but,
Oh, yes, sir.
but all of you know, I wish we had mentioned Daryl Hunter, but Daryl officially works for Sodexo, but has been here forever, should be right here with us. So please tell him we did not forget that.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. So guys, with that, thank y'all so much for being here. Thanks for being part of our family, and we look for the next 35 years. Thank you.